Greetings and welcome to Creative Briefing, an ad hoc live streamed show that aims to explore the various aspects of creativity and what it means to be creative. If you're a fellow creative around the world, around the internet, then thank you for joining me. You know what I'm talking about. And if you are someone who thinks, hey, I'm not really creative, I haven't got a creative bone in my body, well, come along for the ride and I'll show you how, you can explore your creativity. Stick with me throughout the coming days and weeks, and maybe you'll find something that piques your interest and you feel like giving it a try. Maybe you're a fellow creative and you're just looking for another avenue to explore. So I try to do that, inspire and motivate people to try different aspects of what they might already be doing, or something completely outside of their comfort zone. Today I'm going to play around in some 3D modeling rendering software called Cinema4D. If you're an Adobe Creative Cloud user, you have Cinema4D already. You may not know that. If you're an After Effects user, you may already be well aware of Cinema4D. But there are many 3D programs out there, and they all follow similar workflows, but they all have some very specific sort of functions. So what I'm going to be demonstrating in Cinema4D today, it might not be as transferable to other apps. The concepts generally are, but and that's really what I'm going to be sort of showing, is how to create some abstract art. So I'm a 3D generalist. I am not a 3D visual effects, special effects expert by any means. My usage of 3D is more in the world of very basic motion graphics and creating odd elements here and there. I'm far from a 3D expert, but it is a world that is worth exploring. It's fun. It's a great way to explore creativity and create something different, and especially like I'm going to be demonstrating today, the world of like abstract art, whether this is for a background for maybe a product shot, whether it's just for fun, for an art piece. There are numerous ways you could put these techniques to use. So as I said, we have Adobe After Effects, and if you're a subscriber to Adobe's Creative Cloud, you have After Effects, and the install for After Effects comes with an install for Maxon Cinema4D. And the easiest way, or like the only way really, to initiate Cinema4D from After Effects is to go File, New, Cinema4D file. That will create a Cinema4D, a C4D file in your After Effects project window, which then you can go to Edit, Edit Original. When you first create the object, it will launch Cinema4D, and then you will be in the C4D workspace. When you save, that object will be nested in the After Effects project. If you want to come back at a later date and edit original, that will bring you over to the Cinema4D workspace. So I have a project sort of initiated. I've got my workspace set up how I like it. I've got a couple of materials made, and they're just one is just the very stock Denel shader, which create shader Denel, and that's just a very highly specular, highly shiny, like a glossy painted metal surface. And I've taken that, duplicated it, and just darkened the red a little bit. Wherever the red occurs, I've just brought its values down by 50%, so it's darker and less saturated as an alternative. And what I'm going to create today is just some blobs and shapes and shattered elements that create something that's abstract. It's nondescript, and it has some energy, it has some cool lines and shapes and shading and glossiness to it. Just going to go with like a stock glossy red because it looks nice. So the first thing I'm going to do is just create an object, a platonic, and I'm going to set that to a buckyball, and that looks kind of like a soccer ball with those hexagon sides. Anyway, it looks kind of a bit like a, you know, a very square soccer ball. So I'm going to leave these parameters as they are, and I'm just going to drag the Denel glossy red onto that, and I'm also going to right click on it and add a Cinema4D tag, the Fong, and that just kind of smooths out the edges. And I'm also going to hold down Option, and I'm going to click on the Hypernerbs, the sub D surface, which is just going to smooth everything out. If you turn that off, it just sort of smooths everything out, subdividing, makes a mesh nice and smooth. So it takes that, if you look at the wireframe of what the platonic looks like, and then you turn the sub D on, you can see it just sort of smooths out those lines. So and I'm going to take the camera, and I'm going to, in this camera, when I do my abstract art, and I like to play with this a lot, it's fun, and I have all kinds. It's great for making custom desktops or just Instagram art, and this is like, I've set up my workspace here to be my render setting to be, you know, 1000 by 1000. It's a square image format with the intention that it's going to be some kind of Instagram post of some kind. So this abstract art technique is great for that. So let me just go into slightly larger screen so maybe you can see a little clearer as I work through this. So like I was saying, the field of view of the camera is, you know, quite wide. I think default it's somewhere around sort of 50. I just brought it out to about 90, 100. So you get a really wide angle lens on the camera, which it distorts things. So to adding to that abstractness, if that's a word, the wide angle lens really sort of exaggerates that. So with a wide angle lens, I need to bring the camera very close to the object, and then I can maybe, there we go. So that's going to fill the screen, and then we're going to sort of blow this up and distort it. So also as we go, I'm not going to do any real renders. I'm going to use the interactive render region, which is found here in the little render menu, and I'm going to set the quality just, you know, to somewhat low, just to keep things speeding along. Another thing about 3D modeling, rendering, animation is that the render times kill you. You are sort of, like I said, it's a slippery slope. You're sucked into adding more global illumination and more reflections and more lights because it's so easy to do and add, and it looks really, really good. But everything you add, every subdivision, every volumetric light, it just adds to the render time. So it can get quite heavy. You can create a beautiful looking image, but then it's going to take 10 hours to render each frame. So that's the caveat with 3D, it's finding that balance. So I'm going to set the quality, you know, moderately low, and as you can see, there's nothing showing up just yet. So I'm going to make a light, and I'm going to move this somewhat slightly behind the camera, so we get like this. And the interactive region renders on the fly, so we can get an idea of what the choices we make and how it affects the final render, as opposed to like just the preview. So it's got some nice gloss there. I'm just going to change the color, make it give it some gold highlights, blow up the intensity a little bit. Leave that like that for now. So the first thing I want to do to start making this abstract and not just like a blobby ball in the middle of my screen, which is not at all interesting, let's do what everyone's favorite trick, and that's blow things up, right? So we use the explosion effects, and I'm going to drag this. I can either drag it into the sub D object, and it will then blow up the result of the subdivision, which, you know, that's still great. You get more angular results, and I can then move the actual explosion object, and you can kind of see the effect where I'm moving the explosion effects around, what effect that has on the polygonal content of that subdivision object. And already we're getting something that's looking less like a sphere, more like a abstract collection of objects. But if I drag the explosion FX into the platonic, now it's going to blow up the platonic, and then the results of that explosion are then going to be subdivided. So we get these really cool swoopy curves, and it looks like they all sort of interlock in some way. So this is kind of fun and cool. I'm liking that. So I'm just going to bring this up a little bit, and maybe we can mess with rotating to find like a particularly good view. I like what's going on down here with these. So let's, oh, we have a little blob out the side here. That's cool. So let's play with the explosion effects real quick. I'm not going to dig too deep. This is the sort of thing that can, again, it's a slippery slope. We can spend hours getting lost in every little, you know, one of these settings here. I'll come back to time in a second. So I'm going to take the strength down to maybe 500 and add just a tiny bit of variation and a tiny bit of variation here. The blast time doesn't really have I can put that to 0. It doesn't really do anything until you start animating these properties and making it an animation that, you know, explodes over time. So the blast range does have an effect, and that's this little red circle in here, and we can then see what that does. That's where the extent of the blast reaches. The blue is the green is the time, and let me just go back to these. The cluster, I'm going to vary the thickness of the elements. I'm going to reduce the density a little bit. Let me say 600 on that, just so they don't clump together too much. And then gravity, I'm going to set to none. I don't want them to fall apart. I want them to sort of blow out. So I'm going to set all these to 0. And the blue is the gravity range, and I'm going to set that to 0 as well, I think. So if I go back to the explosion, let's see what we can start messing with. So I'm going to set time to 0 for now. Time seems to have the greatest effect in the explosion effect. As you can see right now, go back to the move tool. If I move, the explosion effect is centered outside of the object. As I start to move this into the object, it's going to have a greater effect to different degrees. So if I select this again and then start going to the time, you can start to see it's going to have a greater effect. Okay. Let's see if that blue, no, that doesn't do anything. Okay, so blast time, blast speed. So blast speed will, that's the, looks like blast speed and blast time are related. So if I take blast time down and increase blast speed, obviously the faster an explosion is going to occur, elements are going to move away from the blast center at a greater rate. So I would say that the blast speed wants to be low. We don't want to blow it up, like completely obliterate it. We just want to break it apart subtly. So I'm going to go back to the time and increase the time a little bit. You see there are bits moving away. And I can play with these, push and pull these elements. The blast speed and the blast time. Then go back to these. And then we can mess around with the position of the blast center to see what kind of effect we can have on our polygonal data. So that's kind of cool. Putting the blast in the center and then just really reducing the effect it has, so that just some elements pull apart. We did have a larger blast when we had the blast out. You're going to get a blast that's going to push elements in a certain direction, and then gravity takes, you know, an effect. Like I said, there's just a wealth of options and possibilities. So for now I'm just going to put these back somewhere in the center, so where you get these two large bits in the front, and you can see the other elements in the rear that are sort of falling apart. So already that's kind of cool and different. So let's add a deformation to that, and I'm going to play with twist because the twist is fun. Again, I can put this in the platonic and I can change that to unlimited and start twisting with some heavy effect. Let me see how far we want to go with this. That's looking pretty cool. Then I can then go and rotate this back around so that I can see this angle in here. That's got some pretty cool shapes. Let me recenter that a little bit, zoom in a little bit, and already it's looking pretty funky. The reflective nature of the material, the highly reflective material, with all the shapes sort of bending and twisting, they then reflect upon themselves, and you get some really cool interactions. And with the bits that are sort of curving around again, all look like they're interlocking. It's somewhat like that melting clock Dali type of Salvador Dali look, you know. That's what it always reminds me of, and that's kind of, you know, what I'm a big fan of, that style, which is kind of how I first got into exploring these types of abstractions. So it's high contrast, red on like a black background. Let's create a landscape. We could create a flat background or a gradient background. I like to play with a landscape again because it has some more undulations and it creates some more abstract sort of shapes. I'm going to do it on the plus axis. I'm going to rotate it around this way, and then I'm going to move this out to the back a little bit, let's say around there, and let's bring this out. Let's look at the properties. Let's fill that until it fills the back of the, make that a little deeper. I'm going to drag this little orange. If you look on the these sort of handles, these are like for the parametric objects. That is, their objects that are editable with parameters. Like you see all these parameters here. This isn't really true polygonal data. The parameters that describe or you use to build the objects create polygons. and you can create a polygonal object. If I check that and hit C, now it's true polygons, but it's no longer editable with these values. I can bring the segments down so that again it's a very coarse polygon mesh. It doesn't have a lot of polygonal data. I'm going to subdivide that again by holding down Option and clicking the hyperNURBS object. That would just smooth things out, but it's creating a more gently wavy background rather than lots and lots of detail. So I'm going to make the rough furrows 100%, the fine furrows 0%, again to make it more undulating and wibbly wobbly rather than, you know, a detailed textural. I'm going to increase the scale a little bit, make the sea level about 30, the plateau around 70. And let's see how that, if I go back to my 4 screen, I can see if we take a look at just that background, how it's got some motion to it. It's not just a flat surface, which will, again, if I add the darker Donnell surface to this, now I've got some cool texture in the background, slightly darker shade that just extends what is going on with the main, you know, the exploded buckyball. And I just move this slightly this way. Well, that's fine for now. I'm not going to worry about the minutia for this. You could finesse these types of things for hours. I want to sort of keep moving. So that already looks really cool. You could lay some text over that and have a great, you know, Instagram post, you know, for the day. It makes a great background. You know, it could make a cool desktop for your computer or for your iPad. So what else can we do? Let's play around with the light real quick and see what we can do. I like to put the light in the middle of like these spherical objects. You get a really different. If I bring it down just a little bit, now it's a little moodier. It's almost like you're inside a blood vessel and you're flowing along with the blood platelets. Let's reduce the intensity a little bit. Now we're getting some nice reflections in there. That's looking really cool. The outer objects are sort of dark and are framing this nice glow inside. That's really cool. Let's take the light again and move that lower down and slightly, well, let's see, maybe we can put it see what that looks like. Yeah, that's very cool and moody. And let's bring that down. Further we move it away, the sort of more diffuse the lighting gets. That's cool. It's a bit monotonal. So what I think I'm going to do, okay, so let's do this. Let's bring the light back up. I do like the look of that. That's very, very cool. Let's bring the light behind the object, so it's sort of obscured by the object in front of the camera. Maybe slightly off to the side. Got a nice little kicker there on that. That's lovely. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a sphere. I'm going to make it 1,000 centimeters, so it's really huge, and now the sphere is like a globe that is containing our world. We have our object and our camera and our lights inside this sphere. Let's make that maybe 1200. so it's a little bit bigger. And I'm going to drag this basic material onto the sphere. Now what's cool about this is this material don't need reflectance, it's just luminance. It just has, well, let's just put layer, make a white. Get high intensity white luminance material onto a sphere. It's now going to act like a skylight almost, to the very, very basic, very, very simple and also render efficient way of kind of faking global illumination, which is and it really isn't, but it's mimicking light bouncing off everything in the world and creating a more even light. It's an old trick, and it still works, especially for render efficiencies and also for creating effects like in this case. So the white reflecting on the highly reflective red, it's not terribly attractive. So if we select a reddy pinky hue and then increase the saturation on that, now we're getting some duotone. It's still a little bright, so if we reduce the brightness, the effect of that luminance, we've got a dimmer switch on the light, we can dial that down just to where we're getting some interesting highlights, where the main light isn't illuminating the red glossy surface. What would if I disable that real quick, you can see that it's just on these dark areas that would not be illuminated. We're kind of faking in some bounced light from the world, and now we've got a little bit of tonal variation, and that is really, really cool, especially down in here where we have like a little bit where it's blending between the two. We've got this lovely little highlight here and this lovely little highlight here. That's really, really cool. So let's just do a quick render of that. Hopefully it won't take too long. You bear with me. This is like, as I say, anyone who's familiar with 3D modeling and rendering animation knows exactly that the bane of watching the scan line as your frame renders, and if you've got any kind of lengthy animation, you're watching scan lines after scan lines after scan lines. Anyway, this is where the final output happens, where all the anti-aliasing and the subdivision gets sort of pumped to a higher quality, and takes a little time, but you can see some of the undulations and the reflections and the lighting highlights. To me, this is a lovely abstract work of art. You could almost frame that and put it on a wall as a series, a triptych. Again, you can use it as a background, put some text over it and use it as a background for an Instagram post. Again, you could use this as a background for a motion graphics piece, this type of effect. Really fun, really effective. Let's rewind a little bit to After Effects. You get this version of Cinema4D. It's Cinema4D Lite. It is a stripped down version of the full Cinema4D package, which is a very expensive, very high-end, professional 3D modeling, animation, rendering package. Maxon and Adobe been kind enough to work out some kind of deal where you get this for free for the cost of your Adobe subscription. You get a really great intro to the world of 3D with arguably the best 3D for motion graphics, at least for graphic design. But it doesn't have, I think you're limited to a certain resolution. You can only sort of put out maybe low high def renders. You can't do 4K, you can't do 8K, like you can with the full. You don't have the full MoGraph package that comes with the commercial version of Cinema4D. There are some restrictions, but it's a great entry to the world of 3D. If you're just an Adobe subscriber for, say, InDesign and Photoshop, you want to dabble in 3D, it's a great way to enter that world and slip down that slippery slope. So that is abstract art in Cinema4D. These techniques here for creating abstract art apply. Obviously, Cinema4D in the world of 3D is, like I said at the beginning, very specific. So if you're an Adobe subscriber, go and play with Cinema4D. It's a great addition to like everything else you get with a Creative Cloud. So highly recommended. Again, another highly recommended way to explore your creativity if you haven't already done so. Well, I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun. I hope you're, inspired to go and create something cool, even if maybe your computer graphics is not your thing. Maybe some of these shapes and forms and reflections maybe inspire you to sketch or paint or carve or mold out of clay, something in a similar vein. That's the goal, inspiring creativity in whatever way you decide to take action upon it. It's all good, and it's all benefits society, really. When we're all happy and creative, then that's a good thing. So go out there, be creative, have fun, and until the next creative briefing, I've been Adam. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.